So good afternoon. My name is Nick Norimoto. I'm the University Budget Director here at Dominguez Hills. I'm thankfully joined with the budget team so my Associate Vice President of Business Finance, Dr. Tony Jake is here with us. I also have some couple of my analyst staff, my senior budget analyst, Brian Jaramillo, and budget analyst, Abraham Gonzalez. So budget team's here. Also, just want to give a shout out and thank you to Alexis for organizing and coordinating, scheduling this budget lunch and learn. We thank you for handling all of that. We have a great turnout this afternoon. We expected so just with the communication that we have received from the president earlier this week. We also, some of you may have joined yesterday's Conversation That Matters, which was also a great turnout in which we did provide kind of a 30-minute budget update to those that attended in person and also on Zoom. And we're kind of following up with this budget lunch and learn. Usually, in the past, we've maybe discussed more technical ways to help with budgeting, but we wanted to utilize this time to also provide similar update. It's going to be similar information that we presented yesterday for those that missed it, but also we wanted to provide, as we are just finished February, we are past the second quarter, but we have second quarter kind of information we wanted to provide those that are here. So just to get started of what Budget Lunch and Learns are, it is a continuing series of conversations on campus to discuss the background and health of budget here at CSU-DH. Today, as I mentioned, we're going to provide a campus budget update, kind of reviewing Q2 financial information. In addition, we're going to review some of the information that we shared yesterday at Conversations That Matters, just to those that had missed it. Of course, at the end, we will want to be aware of time, so we want to make sure we have time to receive any questions that this group may have. Right now, the chat's kind of disabled, but we're going to try to open it up at the end of the presentation, as well as feel free to raise your hand, and if you have any questions that you want to speak towards the end, that'd be great as well. I also wanted to introduce, before we kind of get started with the information, kind of provide something that I really enjoyed what the provost had said yesterday, kind of introduction of where we are as far as budget and what we're kind of facing. And we'll go into more information as we go into the presentation. But there are three things that he mentioned, and I kind of want to reiterate those things as far as how, where we are as far as budget goes. Right now, as kind of in the news, the state of California's, as far as state revenues, are not as high as what has been projected. And from the information that we received, they are expecting certain deficits when it comes to state revenues. We say that because our campus is funded with state monies, and that's something that would impact us in the long run if that continues to be so. The second is that we, as a campus and as a system, do have certain mandates and certain expectations as far as whether it be increasing costs or certain programming. So that's something that we're always trying to be aware of, and also make sure we have the right infrastructure when it comes to those certain mandates. And then lastly, enrollment. And that's a huge conversation, something that we really want to provide more information. We've had lunch and learns last year about enrollment, how that's impacted our budget. And it's something that we are still facing, and we expect to seriously impact how we move forward as far as budget goes. So yes, that's kind of just an introduction of that. So I'm going to get started as far as the budget information. I want to provide kind of some recaps, and for those that are new to budget conversations and finance information, I'm going to try provide more explanation about certain things. Of course, towards the end, if there's anything that needs to be clarified, we can go over that. So when it comes to our campus, we utilize different sources of revenue. The first one is what I've discussed is regarding state appropriation. That is the money that we receive from the state based on tax dollars, state revenue dollars. And how we get those dollars specifically at our campus is based on meeting certain enrollment targets. In addition to that, along with state appropriation and what we call our kind of main operating fund, is that we also utilize tuition, in which we have a system-wide tuition rate that is charged to students, and we utilize that revenue to, again, for our main operations. And of course, that's also driven by enrollment. As enrollment fluctuates, if it goes up, we are able to collect more revenue. If it goes down, we see a revenue decrease. The other sources of revenue that our campus also utilizes includes other student fees. We have philanthropy, which, in which we have our university advancement work with donors, grants and contracts when it comes to sponsored contracts, whether it be research or things like that. We do utilize fund balance and reserves, which are, as we close a fiscal year, which is June 30th every year, we do have a balance of what of available revenues. We say this because that's a one-time kind of source, as that's based on our spending that changes, and if we utilize those monies, they won't be there after it's spent. And then lastly, auxiliary partners, which are kind of our self-support and enterprise units, like Toro Auxiliary Partners, housing, ASI, LSU, things like that. So this is kind of a general landscape of where we are as far as a campus. And the conversations that we've been having and we want to continue to have is regarding this left side, state appropriation and tuition. Kind of an additional breakdown when it comes to that main operating fund, what we call, and the finance people are really aware when it comes to spending money and things like that, and planning for funds, is we call it AADHT. It's a code that we use on our campus. When it comes to revenue sources, again, it's our state appropriation, tuition. We do utilize other student fees, specifically like non-resident tuition. So any non-resident students that attend and enroll on our campus, they are assessed an additional non-resident tuition fee that they pay. Of course, we also utilize application fees. So whenever we are preparing for the upcoming year and students that want to attend our campus and apply, a fee is also assessed, and that's another revenue source that we utilize. And lastly, cost recovery, which is a separate revenue source, but it's basically revenue that's recovered from those auxiliary enterprise entities for costs that our operating incurs when we provide services to those entities. Before we get into like a Q2 update of finances, again, these are all kind of just budgetary information and recap. This is a slide that was shared with yesterday at Conversations That Matters. I felt like it would be a good location here to recap this beginning of the year when it comes to an update. The first is this line chart, in which we first discussed and wanted to reiterate here and recap, is that at the beginning of this fiscal year, we did begin with a 6% budget reduction to our operating fund, in order for our main goal was to right size our budget to align with the campus enrollment and revenue collection. This line chart is a visually shows how our enrollment and budget is impacted by that. As you can see by the red line here is our actual enrollment. This is how many students have actually enrolled in our campus over the past 3 years. This number currently at 23-24 is a projected enrollment number, as we have just finished, as we've just passed spring census. We have our enrollment team finalizing what those numbers are, but this is the projection that we have right now as far as what we're going to end. But as you can see, so this is our actual enrollment. When it comes to this orange and blue line here, this is our target enrollment number. The orange being what our campus has base budgeted, what our campus budgeted and projected our enrollment to be and planned for. And then the blue line being what the chancellor's office, what the system has established as far as our enrollment target. But really, as you can see, is back in 21-22, our actual enrollment was above those planned numbers. But up to 23-24, our enrollment has declined, and we are now below that number. Because we began this fiscal year to right size, we made that decision, towards the end of the last fiscal year. We were closer to that chancellor's office target. So our right sizing was to adjust this orange line to make sure that it matched with our chancellor's office line. The 6% reduction is, so as we started the year, we assessed the reduction, exercised the reduction to our divisions, and the funds that resulted from that reduction, we held that back centrally in what we call centrally monitored CM. And as we go through the slides, we can show you, we'll show you where those funds are specifically, but we held it centrally. So we planned to use it to offset the expected revenue shortfall for this year. Our current year target, as you can see from the blue line, it increased from 11,723 last year to 11,823. So because our enrollment target with the chancellor's office grew, these funds were, because our target grew, it did come with additional funds from the chancellor's office. However, because we were making sure that we were assessing our enrollment, we held those funds back centrally. We did not distribute those funds to the rest of the campus, to departments, because we were told by the chancellor's office that if we did not grow this year, those funds would be swept. And as we can see just from what our enrollment, how it's been performing, we did not grow. So that was another, we kind of expected that. So we held those funds centrally. That way, next year, when it does get swept, it's going to go back to the chancellor's office. So as we go through our Q2 financial projection and kind of an update of where we are as of the mid-year, just wanted to provide some information that, we closely monitor the budget by running projection reports at the close of each month. We're a little bit past the Q2, which would be December month end. We're still in the process of closing February. So as far as a fully closed month that we have is of January of 2024. So the information that we're going to show is of January. Do want to emphasize that these projections we want to take with a grain of salt, just because it's a preliminary summary. We're running projections based off of the data that we can see and what we have. However, as we know, things can change throughout the year. Spending could fluctuate, but based off of information, this is the projections that we have. And speaking of projections and what we're going to see on these financial reports, we have actuals to date, which is, again, January month end, real expenditures that we see in our financial books. We have projected actuals, so projections for the remainder of the year. So the leftover of 5 months for the rest of the fiscal year is based on how we spent in the first 7 months. And then lastly, encumbrances. And for those that don't know what those are, these are basically financial commitments that have already been placed and made by our units. They when a department is planning and wants to commit certain amount of funds to certain expenditures, they open a purchase order and it shows up as an encumbrance on our ledger. So now we're going to go through our financials finally. I know kind of a long-winded intro, but this is we're going to go through it. So as we go through the report, we're going to first look at our revenues and sources. So in the beginning of the presentation, we talked about those revenue sources. We're going to show that breakdown, how that's shown in our main operating budget. So what we do is we have a original budget, which is our base ongoing budget, what we can expect each year. Adjusted budget, which means any one-time transactions. So it's things that happen once throughout that year, and it's not something that is an ongoing transaction. So the base and then our one-time add up to our total budget. As far as revenue sources, again, we have our state allocation, in which that is a base ongoing amount. So that's at $137,679,000. Back to our revenues and back to our revenue sources, we have our tuition and student fees. So that's encompassed in this student fee line of nearing $87 million of base money. And then cost recovery, again, the funds that we recoup and recover from those auxiliary enterprises, about $3.1 million. So that's all of our base money. And then we have adjusted budgets in which kind of one-time transactions when it comes to additional funds that we may receive. And then lastly, also an adjusted and one-time, as mentioned, with those primary sources of funds, fund balance reserves, it is we carried over from the last fiscal year about $48 million. So that's our budget and our plan of what of revenues. Then we have to look at our actuals in yellow. So we have our actuals to date as of January. We have our projected actuals in which we project based off of the information that we have. Encumbrances, which are our purchase orders or committed expenses. And in total, we can review that as our year-end actuals. So what we've collected as far as state allocation, I mean, we get that as a kind of a monthly transaction about money from the state, $80 million, but we know that we will get that at the year end. Student fees is nearing $80 million as well. However, because we've closed spring census, we're trying to be conservative in the fact that we may receive additional trickling revenue, but because spring semester is already on its way and the tuition and fees have already been reported, we're not projecting any additional revenue. Cost recovery is also a transaction that we will be made whole as that plans are made in the prior year. And then lastly, other revenues, again, are just kind of one-time transactions, but that's not something we really consider as far as our base dollars. But based on our actuals, and specifically on our student fees line, we base budgeted $87 million, but we only collected 80. So when it comes to what we review as far as our financial data is, we see a $7.9 million revenue shortfall. But based on our kind of that recap of our fiscal year, the projected revenue shortfall will be addressed and covered by utilizing that 6% reduction in funds that's held centrally. So now that we've reviewed our revenues, now we're going to look into our expenditure side. So we've looked at our sources. Now we're going to look at our uses of our operating fund, and we view it the same way. So like revenue, we have the different sources. We budget a certain amount, and we look at our activity on actuals to see what our balance is. Same as our expenditures. Every division, and what you'll see is we have different I'll say programs, but we have a budget for everything on our campus, and then they spend against that, and then we can see what their year-end balance is projected to be. So here are all of our 7 divisions. Each division has a base budget beginning this year, and this is net after their 6% reduction. Adjusted budget are one-time funds, so that's funds that they've maybe carried over, or funds that they've already committed from the last fiscal year. Could it also be one-time transactions in which they received some one-time funds this year? And then here are the actuals based on what they've actually spent, what they're projected, and their current open purchase orders or open encumbrances that they have right now. What you'll see is based on our year-end actuals is that we do see some pretty significant deficits in divisions like admin and finance and information technology. But again, with a grain of salt, these are just projections based on the information that we know. We also know that purchase orders are significantly high. So as we near the year end, those will be decreased. We also, specifically with admin and finance, we carried a lot of the COVID-19 and pandemic expenses with us and carried those deficits, but we are working with the federal government to reimburse us. So that's also being in play. And there's also, I think that's it. So that's the division's information. In addition to the divisions, we also have centrally monitored, which is another set of funds that we have in our operating fund that includes our benefits pool. So all the salary expenditures are managed within the divisions, but all the benefits attached to those salaries are all held centrally. Utilities is also a university expense. The financial aid, specifically the SUG State University Grant Program, is also held centrally. And then other centrally monitored, which I have more information on the next slide to kind of give you that breakdown. But we also have other centrally monitored programs that the university kind of manages. But overall, just with projections, we're projecting a $25 million balance. So just thinking about what we carried over last year, it was $48 million, but we're seeing a pretty significant decrease about what our balances will be for this year. There are a lot of things, like I mentioned, about how spending could fluctuate as far as this year goes. We still have 4 months of activity that we will be monitoring. Another thing too, as something that will be in conversation yesterday, that has been in conversation yesterday, and I'll also go over later in the presentation, is that this doesn't include compensation increases, as those haven't been inputted into our system yet. So there are a lot of things that are still that will still be impacting how our financials by the year end. So this is our uses again. So now we're going to go into that other centrally monitored. Kind of wanted to give you more of a breakdown of that. So I'm going to, the same information, but first I just put the total divisions. So all the divisions right here in this one line. And then the rest of it essentially monitored. So again, we still have the benefits, utilities, and financial aid, but then really other centrally monitored want to provide what that breakdown looks like. So the first one specifically is that 6% reduction of funds. So that's when I mentioned before that we've held that centrally. And based on that $7.9 million revenue shortfall that when going over the revenue, we're going to utilize this specific line item of the reduction to address that shortfall. Now, the shortfall is $7.9 million, but the reduction of funds that we have held centrally is $6.2 million. So that still means that from our year-end balances and what I'll go over, we have some centrally monitored reserve. We still have an additional $1.6 million of shortfall projected that we'll have to cover with one-time funds. So, so that was a reduction. Wanted to highlight here also our centrally monitored reserve, which is up to $8 million. So this is kind of an unallocated pot of funds that our university holds centrally. It is one time. It's not a base funded amount. So it's an amount that if we spend down, the only way to replenish it is if we make an effort to invest in like this reserve. This is very important to know too, because we have certain policies based on the system, based on the CSU, in which we should be carrying a certain amount of reserve. It's ideally, 6 months, but 6 months of payroll, but we only have $8 million. And just to put it in perspective of about what our monthly payroll is, we just finished payroll yesterday. And just from my review, payroll is about, total for the university is $17 million. But when it comes to this specific fund, it's nearing $16 million. So just based on our unallocated reserve amount, we don't even have like a month. We have about a half a month's worth of payroll available in case economic certainty and in case something of emergency may happen. So it is a fund source, yes, but we also have to consider what that means in respect to our expenditures, our monthly payroll, and things like that. I am going to go over just other things essentially monitored. So in addition to the reduction of funds that we have held centrally, we also pay annually insurance premiums. So that's, insurance premiums that the chancellor's office, the CSU system, they assess expenditures on each campus. I should have highlighted this specifically too, but the third line here is 23-24 enrollment growth. So I mentioned before that we the chancellor's office increased our enrollment target, which meant that we received additional funds. That is the number right there, 791,000 of additional funds that we received that we held centrally. But we did not want to distribute amongst the divisions because that specific line item will go away next year. We also hold an I&I, just our I&I building, we have a loan with the chancellor's office, so we base budgeted that as that will be a 30-year expenditure. And then we also have some funds, some commitments that we wanted to hold for 24-25 that was approved by our university budget committee. We have one-time funds as well, basic needs, that's funds from the chancellor's office, but it is being planned to be spent. President's Initiative, which is also a university budget committee initiative that was approved to give the president some funds each year to for him and his office to manage. So things like athletic scholarships, athletics, things like and athletics are some of the items, for example, that he utilizes this money for. Indirect cost recovery, HERF, which is during the pandemic, we were able to get federal aid from HERF, and we were able to set aside some indirect cost, and that is also money that we've held centrally. We also have planned to utilize that to bridge the digital divide gap, which were expenditures that our division of IT had spent to during the pandemic. So we wanted to hold some money back to kind of bridge that gap as we go forward. But again, it's one-time funds. The Black Women's Think Tank is we are kind of like a pass-through from the state. The state gave money to this program, and we basically pass it through to kind of a consulting firm here, in which it's a program that they work with. There are other smaller things too, like loan repayments. We also pay the LSU for facility use, which is an annual expense that the university pays each year for our university to utilize the LSU space. Emergency operations and state fire marshal are also university expenses as well. It's 12:30. So I'm gonna take the time to kind of provide the information that we shared yesterday. So as far as what we are facing, as far as in budget, we kind of went over the enrollment information. So again, that is still something that we are focusing on, enrollment decline, and that's something that we are still facing as we're seeing enrollment continue to decline. So this year we made an effort and made it our goal to right size to make sure that at least our enrollment targets were aligned with the chancellor's office target. So that's what happened with the 6% reduction. Again, we're facing continued enrollment decline below the CO target. And that means a revenue and budgetary impact. And we're going to go more detail about this. The second thing that we're facing are compensation packages. And that I kind of mentioned briefly too when it comes to what we're going to see in our finances for the rest of the year. But those salary increases have been agreed and approved, and we will be seeing them in the next couple months as those payments will be released to our employees. When it comes to those salary increases, and I'll share furthermore again too, is that we have limited funding from the state. And because of that, campuses are expected to cover that shortage, the shortage of funding that we don't receive from the state. So specifically to the enrollment decline, I want to provide the same graph as we talk about this. So when it comes to enrollment as well, as you can see, how our enrollment in red actuals fluctuates compared to the enrollment in blue of our target. I wanted to introduce what the CSU has planned for when it comes to enrollment, because this is a system-wide issue. It's something that all campuses are facing when it comes to enrollment. The CSU, the Chancellor's Office, initiated a plan called the Enrollment Target and Budget Reallocation Plan, in which they are going to group the campuses within 3 groups. And all the groups are identified by where their enrollment lands compared to their target. So there's group X, in which their enrollment is more than 10% below their target. There's group Y, in which their actual enrollment lies between 10% and 10% under enrolled and 0% below target. And then lastly, group C are campuses that are either at or above their target. Based on these numbers, and again, with that projection of where we're at right now of 23-24, we're currently 774 FTES, or, oh, I'm not sure how that typo meant. I apologize, but that meant a 6.5%. So right now we're currently 774 FTES below, what is equivalent to a 6.5% under our 11,823 target. Just to put in perspective, if our enrollment continues to decline and hits that below 10% mark, which is equivalent to 10,640 FTES or 1,183 FTES below that target, we will be moved into the group X category, meaning, and I'm sorry I didn't share this when I explained the groups, but meaning if you are in the X category, the chancellor's office is going to reallocate funds, reallocate targets, and take those monies away and give it to campuses that are in the group Z category. Sorry if that was a little confusing. So basically, I just want to say that again. So currently we're right now, just based on our performance, we're in group Y, meaning campuses here won't see an impact when it comes to the reallocation plan. But if we were to get to that 10% mark below, our campus would move to the group X category. And if that were the case, the chancellor's office is going to take funding away, decrease our target, give that funding to a campus that's in group Z and increase their target. So next year, our target is going to go down 11,723. This is not, so our target is going to decrease. This is not in lieu of the reallocation plan. That was due to the funding that we received for growth. But it is good to know that our target is going to be adjusted, and we're going to keep track of where our enrollment lands as far as those threshold goes, like if our campus is going to be moving between different groups. Okay, so next thing is our compensation packages. This screenshot right here was information that was provided to us by the chancellor's office to provide us cost projections of what salary increases will look like for the system as well as for the campuses. They provided what all across the board 5% projection will be for 3 years, take into account of state funding that we're going to receive based on our compact agreement with the state. In addition to, as we all know, tuition rates was approved to be increased effective next academic year. So that means additional revenue that we're going to receive for that. So basically, at the top are our total costs that we're going to see when it comes to salary increases, and then taking down, based on the cost, we're going to have some funds from the state. We're going to have some funds from tuition revenue, but we still have a shortfall that the CSU, in which the campuses have to take care of themselves with their own funds. In total for the system, it's for the 3 years, and for base need, it's at $322 million. Our university at Dominguez Hills this is the breakdown that we have for each of the years. And in total for 3 years, it's going to be $9.9 million, nearing $10 million. So again, this is projections estimating a 5% salary increase across the board for 3 years. Based on the current estimations, our campus is projected to need $10 million in base funds to cover compensation packages. And something I just want to take a pause to is that another thing that was discussed yesterday that's very important to realize, since we talked about enrollment in this prior slide, is that that's something that is ever flowing, ever changing. It's something that, I know the president had wanted to communicate that it's something that we can change and improve. And based on if enrollment grows, that's great. We'll have more revenue to utilize. However, the compensation packages are figures and estimations that are things that are going to happen and kind of set in stone. So this is, as far as need goes, when it comes to budget, this is something that we absolutely need over the next 3 years. And it does not consider of any enrollment kind of impact as well. So when it comes to our next steps, when we're looking at these two things that we're facing, enrollment and compensation packages, we want to continue these conversations that we're having. So transparency, again, is a huge thing that we want to provide to the campus community. That's the reason, that's why we had, the president wanted to share that email. We wanted to have the conversation that matters. We have the lunch and learn today. We're going to have another lunch and learn scheduled in a couple months, and I'm sure we'll have other meetings and other meetings that will happen on campus to provide more transparency, provide updates, to provide information that we'll have to the campus community when it comes to these things that are impacting our budget and what we're going to do when it comes to it. We're also, for next steps, is exercising flexibility. We are working with our budget teams amongst our divisions, and they're working with their leaders, their vice presidents, the executive leadership team. Everyone's really working to be flexible when it comes to the information they need to provide in order to essentially work to strategically implement a budget reduction in order to take account for these shortfalls for compensation for enrollment that's going to happen in the next few years or in the future. So right now, I'm going to open up the floor. We have about 20 minutes left of the hour. I just want to be mindful of time. I'm sorry if I took a little longer, but I'm glad we still have time. But open up the floor for questions. I know there may be some questions when it comes to all this information, whether it be clarifying or, yeah, I'm going to open the floor. Feel free to raise your hand. I'm not sure if Alexis, if the chat's open, but for now, feel free to, if there are any questions.
The chat should be open.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any questions from the group? I know it's a lot of information. Team Hi. Do you have a question?
Oh, I have a question. So the budget that you show us, I don't see any reserve money. Is there any reserve for us?
Any reserve money?
Yeah, come back to that slide.
So I do, let me go back. Apologies. So here at the bottom red square is our centrally monitored, our reserve money that we have held in the university level. So this is kind of like the unallocated reserve that we do have. In the presentation, we do have about $8 million in the reserve, but we do have certain reserve policies that we want to try to maintain, which is save a certain amount for economic uncertainty, and that means 6 months of payroll. But in respect to how much our payroll is, we have about maybe half to cover a half month's worth of payroll.
So are we going to face with the layoff or furlough?
Right now, we don't have an answer to that question. Everything is in works, and there's different conversations happening on the executive cabinet level. So right now, we don't have an answer to that. And if and when we do, it will be communicated through your area vice president.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Cheyenne, did you have a question?
Thank you. Yes, I was wondering if there are plans of what to do to cut the budget, or if anything has been thought out. I know a lot of this is expected, or the chancellor's office has still got numbers to come in, and so maybe we don't have that thought through. Do we know when we'll have it thought through, or do we know what
the current stopgaps are to deal with this deficit?
I'm not sure if this answered your question as far as what's being thought through. All of our leaders and our budget people are reviewing their budgets to provide as much information to our leaders to assess like things like vacant positions or things like that, or ways to cut costs. But currently it's just the work is being done right now.
So we don't actually really have any answers at this moment to any of these.
These kind of questions we could really ask, is what I'm pointing out.
Right.
So do we have a date then we would have answers to a lot of the questions we might have?
We're, for those specific questions, probably hopefully by the May lunch and learn for, I don't want to say for sure, but hopefully by the May lunch and learn. And you should, again, and depending on what area you're in, your area vice presidents are probably, or will be probably having conversations with their divisions openly pretty soon.
Thank you.
We do have some questions in the chat. And if you have other questions, feel free to raise your hand. One question is, where do we stand in comparison with other campuses? That's a great question. Other campuses are are going through the same thing as us, really. Enrollment issues. Some campuses more severe than others. As far as compensation goes, we're in the exact same spot. The only thing is that just in relative to size, their number is going to be either higher or lower based on, just the size of their campus and how many employees they have. But as far as what other campuses are going through, it's exactly the same. Will these budget issues impact current job searches, whether pending or offers already made and accepted?
And that's the answer, again, that will go to your area vice president, especially what you have in your area. That'd be a conversation for your fiscal officer in your area or your vice president. As far as like what's currently offered and what's on the table.
Thanks, Tony. The next question is, what's the rationale from the CO in taking money from campuses that are struggling with enrollment to give to campuses that have a surplus in enrollment? Basically, if we drop below 10%, the CO will take. Yes, and this is a great point, and I give it to also to the provost who mentioned this, as it kind of works backwards. It's not something we. And this would be a good question because this was implemented during the time prior to Dr. Garcia starting her position as the chancellor, but it was a way for them to address the system-wide enrollment issues. But I can't say that I disagree with your sentiment in the fact that it is hard for campuses like us to deal with this added layer of enrollment thresholds and enrollment targets when it comes to our growth. Sorry if I couldn't answer your question more clearly, but. Any other questions that we can take?
I'm just scanning to make sure I don't miss a hand.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go to this last slide. Sorry, apologies. That, we do have a lunch and learn scheduled for May 2nd. Thank you to Alexis we do have, an email that gets sent out 2 weeks prior, just a reminder. I believe we are, hopefully we hope to have more information, but within that email communication, there is an opportunity to provide us questions or topics. And, I understand from Cheyenne Cummings, who had maybe questions more specific, that if you want to ask those questions in that, we can take them. I can't say for sure how much we can answer, but just know that our leadership is working to address this and develop a plan. We do understand that time is of essence, and we are approaching the new year soon. So we understand the severity and urgency for this. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to email me. And we thank you again for your time. We ended 12 minutes early. We can give that back to you. Otherwise, if there's any other questions, have a great day.
Nick, if I could ask one more question.
Sure.
Is there any initiatives going on currently asking staff and faculty of different units or different unions on campus to find a budget?
Benefits. For instance, I ran across one of the facilities guys who took door locks off of buildings being torn down from East Academic Complex. Each of those door locks cost $1,500. By doing that, if we have parts that break down, we now have a surplus of materials. And so is there anything like that being identified? Because he did that on his own initiative. So have we thought of setting something up where staff, faculty have some sort of pool or place to go to talk about cost saving initiatives or ideas? Is that something that happens? I don't know.
Yes, we do have our university budget committee that had this presentation first, and I know some comments and resources and ideas have come from that space that they're sharing with our UBC committee, and also more plans to go into some spaces and who do we need to talk to, and bring those ideas to the table. So yes, our UBC is working with that between the UBC area, and I also believe, again, we're looking at bigger task force and bigger conversations about those type of conversations that you're asking about. So yes, that is true. And we are doing that. And right now it's in UBC and probably will go further past that. I know Conversations That Matter yesterday we're asking for feedback to all of us, to your executive teams, AVPs and things of that nature. So if there's anything specifically, yes, but we're also looking in group wide. Our UBC consists of faculty, staff, students as well. So yes, we are having that conversation.
Yeah, Dr. Jackie, if you may allow. So my name is Rama Maladi. I am a UBC chair. If you have any ideas on either increasing revenues or cutting costs, please reach out to your UBC member in your college or department and give them your ideas, and they are all asked to give this feedback back to us. In case if you don't know who that is, you can directly send an email to me. My email address is rmaladi@csudh.edu, and we will take your ideas further. We are at this point compiling all these great ideas and suggestions, which we can implement hopefully in the next 1 year.
Thank you, Dr. Maladi.
I believe all of the UBC contacts are also on the budget website. Am I correct as far as who's for each?
Yeah, the members of committee, I believe, are on the website, yes, but we'll make sure of that. But either email me or Dr. Maladi, we can definitely direct you to the appropriate people. Thank you again for the questions and discussion and your time. We hope you have a great afternoon.